to fear, was the only one who could save you. When a reclusive scientist discovers a dying alien royalty in the wreckage of a forbidden crash, he makes a choice that defies orders and changes the fate of two worlds. But as they uncover a hidden enemy manipulating both sides of a brutal war, trust becomes their only weapon. This isn't just a rescue. It's a rebellion against everything they thought was true. Stay with us, because this story will leave you breathless. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. Rowan Hale didn't expect his quiet evening to end with fire streaking across the sky. He was halfway through repairing a broken field scanner when the forest outside his cabin lit up with an eerie blue glow. A thunderous boom followed, shaking the windows and sending a cascade of tools clattering from his workbench. He rushed to the door, heart pounding as the sound echoed through the hills. That wasn't a meteor. He'd heard meteor impacts before. This was something else. Something mechanical. The sky above the pine trees still shimmered faintly with energy, and a trail of smoke curled upward in the distance. Rowan hesitated only a moment before grabbing his weatherproof coat, his custom-built medkit, and a compact rifle he hadn't used in years. He'd lived in these woods alone for nearly 5 years, pushed out of his scientific post after challenging military protocols. His research on interstellar biology had made him too curious, too bold for the people in charge. Out of sight, out of trouble, they told him, as if exile would stop him from seeking answers. Rowan hiked quickly through the forest, guided by the faint scorch marks on trees and the occasional glowing ember still smoldering in the underbrush. The smell of burning metal mixed with pine sap filled the air, making him lightheaded. Branches cracked underfoot, and insects buzzed nervously as if disturbed by something unnatural. After nearly 15 minutes of walking, he found it. A crater nestled between two ridges, still steaming from impact. A sleek silver vessel lay broken at the center. Unlike any human craft he'd ever seen, its surface shimmered with soft hues of blue and violet. Rowan stepped carefully around the edges, noticing the hull was partly melted, yet organic-looking, almost like the skin of a living creature. A piece of the ship's side had blown open, revealing a dark interior lit only by flickering lights. He paused. This was a violation of protocol. Any alien craft was to be reported immediately. He wasn't even supposed to come near it, much less investigate. But Rowan had stopped following those rules the day they told him to abandon curiosity. Something compelled him forward, some mix of instinct and purpose. That's when he saw the trail. A faint glowing liquid marked a path from the ship into the forest. Drops of it glowed like fireflies along the ground and on broken leaves. Rowan followed it, rifle lowered, but ready. The drops became splashes, then smears, as if whoever had fled was wounded and slowing down. He pushed past a curtain of vines and stopped. Beneath a large pine tree lay a figure, humanoid in shape but clearly not human. Her skin was pale green and glowed faintly in the darkness. She wore cracked armor, detailed and ceremonial, covered in dust and scratches. 2 short curved horns rose from her head, and her long dark hair lay tangled around her face. She was breathing, but barely. One arm clutched her side, where the glowing fluid continued to leak. Rowan raised his rifle on instinct, aiming at the strange being. Enemy, his mind warned. She was not from Earth. For all he knew, she could be dangerous, a scout, or even part of an invasion. But then her eyes opened. They were golden, wide with fear and pain, filled with a kind of awareness that froze Rowan in place. She didn't speak, just stared at him with the weight of someone who had seen too much, someone who was alone in a world not her own. Her mouth moved slightly, letting out soft clicks and hums, a language he didn't understand. Then she tried to sit up, but failed, collapsing with a quiet whimper. In that moment, something shifted. Rowan lowered his weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, knowing she wouldn't understand the words but hoping she could read the tone in his voice. He crouched and carefully opened his med kit. The alien watched him, her body tense, but she didn't resist. He pulled out a scanner and moved it gently over her injury, The results were chaotic, systems failing, organs shutting down. She wouldn't last another hour without help. His training told him to back away, report the sighting, and let the military handle it. But his heart didn't agree. He saw not a threat, but a dying being. And no matter what species she belonged to, she needed help. Rowan tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it gently against her wound to slow the bleeding. She flinched but didn't push him away. As he worked, she reached out with a shaking hand and grasped his wrist. The touch was faint but deliberate. Their eyes met again. Something passed between them. Not words, not logic, but trust. Far above, the rumble of distant aircraft began to grow louder. Military search teams would arrive soon. He looked at the wounded alien, then back toward the sky. "I must be crazy," he muttered. He gently lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin was cool to the touch as he began the trek back to his cabin, dodging searchlights now slicing through the trees. He knew there was no going back. By helping her, he had made a choice, one that might cost him everything. But as she rested her head against his chest, eyes fluttering closed in exhaustion, Rowan felt no regret. Whatever came next, they were bound together now. Rowan pushed open the door of his cabin with his shoulder, careful not to jostle the alien in his arms. The place was dim and quiet, filled with the soft hum of old equipment and the sharp scent of antiseptics. He gently laid her down on the examination table in the center of the room. She didn't resist, but her breathing was shallow, and the glowing fluid still leaked from the wound in her side. Time was running out. He moved quickly, wiping sweat from his brow as he gathered tools and supplies. The scanner he had built from spare parts flickered to life, displaying data he could barely understand. Her anatomy was unlike anything he'd seen in textbooks, but enough was familiar, arteries, organs, a circulatory system, that he could try to help. The wound was deep, likely caused by shrapnel. With steady hands, he cleaned it and applied a gel made from a compound he had created for high-speed tissue repair. It wasn't meant for alien biology, but it was the best he had. She stirred under his touch, her body tense, but she didn't try to stop him. Her eyes opened for a moment, watching him as he worked. Rowan didn't speak. He let his actions be, his words, hoping she could sense that he wasn't a threat. After sealing the worst of the wound, he covered it with a patch and adjusted the light to a softer glow. She needed rest. He pulled up a chair beside the table and sat down, exhausted. Hours passed. The outside world remained quiet, though Rowan knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The military would find the crash site, and eventually, they'd find her. He stared at the glowing scanner screen, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. A quiet chime from the other side of the room caught his attention. Among the alien's belongings was a small beetle-shaped device that emitted a soft green light. Curious, Rowan approached and turned it over in his hands. The casing was cracked, but inside, he recognized what looked like a neural interface. Technology, far more advanced than anything humans had created. Maybe it was a communicator, maybe something more. He sat down with his tools and began to work. For someone else, the device might be impossible to understand, but to Rowan, it was a puzzle. One he wanted to solve. After nearly an hour, he reconnected a delicate circuit and watched the glow brighten. The device hummed softly. He turned around to find the alien sitting upright, her eyes fixed on him. She moved fast. Before he could speak, she had leapt from the table and crossed the room, a small blade suddenly in her hand. Rowan raised his hands, backing away slowly. "Wait," he said, calm and firm. "I helped you." Her golden eyes burned with fear and confusion. She said something in her own language, the sharp tones filled with tension. She pointed the blade at him, her arm trembling slightly. Rowan pointed to her side, then to his own body, miming the injury. "I healed you. Look." She glanced down at the bandages, her free hand touching them gently. Then she looked around the cabin, the scattered tools, the blood-stained cloth, the scanner still blinking softly. Her eyes returned to the beetle device in his hands. Rowan held it out. "Is this yours?" he asked. She stepped closer, slowly, and reached for it. He hesitated, then pulled it back just slightly. "I think I can fix it completely," he added, carefully showing her the damaged corner he hadn't yet addressed. Something in her posture changed. The blade lowered, just a bit. Trust was building, but it was fragile. He spent the next 20 minutes fine-tuning the device. She stood nearby, watching him closely, the blade still in her hand but pointed at the floor. When the final piece clicked into place, the device pulsed with a brighter light. He handed it to her. She pressed it gently against her neck. The device bonded to her skin, and a soft tone rang through the room. Her body relaxed. For the first time, Rowan saw a flicker of relief in her expression. "Can you understand me now?" he asked. The response came through a gentle, mechanical translation. "I can hear your words," she said. Rowan let out a slow breath. "Good. My name is Rowan. I'm a scientist. I found you and brought you here because you were dying." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because you needed help," he said simply. Her gaze hardened. "You are human. Your kind calls us invaders." Rowan shook his head. "I don't follow those orders anymore. I don't believe in war. I believe in understanding." She looked around the room again. Her eyes paused on the patched-up gear, the repaired device, and the quiet hum of his equipment. "You have knowledge of our language, our symbols." "I've studied your kind for years," Rowan said. "Not for war. To learn. To find a better way." She studied him for a long time, the silence filled with tension. Finally, she sat down on the edge of the table, her blade vanishing back into its sheath. "My name is Sayela," she said. "I am not ordinary among my people." "I guessed that," Rowan replied. "Your armor, your markings. You're important." "Yes," she said simply. "Which means helping me could bring you trouble." He nodded. "It already has." Outside, the wind shifted. Rowan could hear the distant thrum of engines, scouting drones perhaps. He turned, back to her. "They'll come looking for you." "I know," she said, voice low. "And when they find me, everything will change." Rowan stood at the cabin window, staring out into the dense forest beyond. The early morning fog clung to the trees like a blanket hiding whatever might be approaching. He hadn't slept. Not really. Since bringing Sayela back and discovering she could speak with him through the repaired translator, his world had shifted. She was no longer just an alien to him. She was a person. Intelligent, strong, scared. And she was still healing. Behind him, Sayela sat at his workstation, slowly examining a series of data streams he had pulled from a communication relay the night before. The signals they found were strange, familiar coding mixed with something neither of them could explain. It wasn't human, and it wasn't hers either. Something else had laced itself into both networks, sending hidden commands. She tapped the screen and turned to Rowan. "This code," she said slowly, "it doesn't belong to either of us." Rowan nodded. "That's what worries me." Before they could discuss it further, a sharp beeping noise echoed from a device on the wall. His perimeter alarm. Someone was close. Rowan moved to the monitor and brought up the feed. A woman in a black tactical coat was approaching the cabin, flanked by 2 soldiers in standard Earth defense gear. He swore under his breath. "It's Mira Kane," he said quietly. "Military recon officer. She was part of my old division." Sayela stood, wincing slightly from her healing wound. "She must not see me." Rowan nodded and moved fast. He opened a floor panel near the far corner of the cabin, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the building. "Stay quiet. No sound. I'll get rid of them." Sayela hesitated, then slid into the space. Rowan closed the panel and kicked a worn rug over it just as the knock came at the door. He took a deep breath and opened it. "Rowan Hale." Mira said with a tight smile. Still alive, I see. Mira, he replied, stepping aside. Didn't expect a visit from Central Command out here. She entered without asking, her eyes scanning the room. We picked up an alien crash nearby. Your cabin is the closest structure to the impact zone. Command wants answers. I saw the lights. A few nights ago, sounded like thunder. Figured it was just another storm. Mira gave him a sharp look. You didn't think to report it? I'm not exactly on their good side these days, he said with a shrug. She walked around slowly, eyes studying his workbench, his tools, the faint scent of sterilized equipment. Her gaze paused on the blood-stained bandages in the trash. Rowan tensed. You've been patching yourself up again? She asked casually. Cut my hand on some broken glass, he replied quickly. Mira's eyes narrowed slightly. Strange. Doesn't look like a hand wound. One of the soldiers outside called her name over the comm. Mira turned toward the door, then looked back at Rowan. Let me be clear. If you see anything or if something comes crawling through those woods, you tell us. Immediately. He gave her a tight nod. Understood. She left, and the moment the door closed, Rowan exhaled deeply. He lifted the rug and opened the panel. Sayela climbed out slowly, her eyes watchful. She suspects. Yeah, Rowan said, pacing. But it's more than that. She wasn't acting like herself. Too controlled. Too robotic. Sayela tilted her head. You think she is not entirely human? I'm not sure what I think, he muttered, but I've known her for years. That wasn't her normal voice, and she mentioned military strategies I've never heard of. Sayela moved to the computer, pulling up another encrypted message stream. We need more information. Rowan sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. As they worked, the signal patterns began to reveal a disturbing truth. Some of the high-level orders from both human and alien leaderships had the same coding embedded within them. It didn't match either language or any known encryption from their two species. This isn't from your people, Rowan said. Sayela's eyes were locked on the screen. And it isn't from yours. They both looked at each other. Then who? Rowan asked. Before either could answer, a soft knock came again, but this time there was no voice, just silence. Rowan picked up his rifle and moved slowly to the door. When he opened it, a figure stood outside. Alone, hooded, and familiar. Sophie, Sayela said, stunned. Rowan stepped aside, confused. The newcomer pulled back their hood, revealing pale skin marked with intricate patterns similar to Sayela's but faded with age and injury. One eye was scarred. He looked tired, worn, but very much alive. They said you were dead, Sayela whispered. They wanted you to believe that, Sophie replied, stepping inside. But I survived, and I have seen what lies behind the war. He dropped a small metal cube onto the table. A projection burst forth showing the face of a creature neither Rowan nor Sayela recognized. Tall, scaled, with eyes too large and too calm. The voice that came with it was deep, cold, and calculating. We have waited long enough. The war must continue. When both sides are weak, we will strike. Rowan stared, speechless. They call themselves the Erics, Sophie explained. An ancient race, masters of manipulation. They've been fanning this conflict from the shadows for years, and now they're here, Rowan said slowly. They never left, Sophie replied. They wear our faces, they speak our languages, but their purpose is only destruction. Sayela's voice was quiet but firm. Then we must stop them. For the first time, Rowan didn't feel alone in his search for truth. The pieces were coming together and the enemy wasn't who he thought. The real threat had always been hidden within. Rain fell steadily as Rowan, Sayela, and Sophie made their way through the forest, the trees above offering little shelter. The mud clung to their boots, and every step was a struggle, but none of them slowed down. They didn't have time. The evidence of the Erics' influence was stored safely in Rowan's waterproof data case. and their destination was clear: a remote research facility built into the side of a nearby mountain. If they could reach it, they could use the long-range transmitter to send the truth to both human and alien governments. But the Erics would not let them go that easily. Sayela moved with surprising strength for someone who had nearly died just days ago. The glow in her skin had returned, dim but steady. She had said little since Sovi's arrival, her focus locked on survival. Rowan glanced at her now and then, wondering how much she was carrying in silence. She had risked everything: her life, her identity, her people, for a world that had once labeled her an enemy. And he, in turn, had betrayed his own people by helping her. But there was no regret in his heart, only certainty. They reached a narrow ridge overlooking a valley. The research facility was hidden beneath a camouflage shield, invisible to satellites, but known to Rowan from his days in exile. He knelt behind a rock and pulled out a small scope. No visible movement around the entrance. That was a good sign, or it was a trap. Sovi crouched beside him, eyes sharp. "We go now," he said simply. They moved quickly, weaving through the trees and approaching the outer gate. Rowan entered the override code. The door clicked open, and they slipped inside, sealing it behind them. The air inside was cold and still. Dust coated every surface, and the low hum of emergency lights echoed through the empty halls. Rowan led the way through a series of corridors until they reached the main communications room. He connected the data case to the transmitter and powered up the system. Lights blinked to life. The screen lit up with connection options for multiple networks: military, diplomatic, civilian. Sayela stepped forward and placed her hand on a bioscan pad. It lit green, accepting her identity. "This will give us direct access to the Astron Council," she said. Rowan typed quickly, preparing the files and attaching the translated messages. The footage from the crash site, the intercepted messages, the projection of the Eric's leader. All of it. The truth, ready to be revealed. Then the lights flickered. Rowan froze. That's not normal. A low whine filled the air as the outer security alarm activated. Someone was here. Sayela turned toward the hallway, her hand reaching instinctively for her blade. Sovi took a defensive position near the door. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, and moments later, the familiar figure of Mira Kane appeared. But this time she wasn't alone. 2 armored soldiers flanked her, and her eyes glowed faintly blue. Unnatural, cold, controlled. "You really thought you could escape?" she said, voice now deeper, layered. "You've seen too much." Rowan stepped forward. "We know what you are. You're not Mira. You're one of them." The creature that had worn Mira's face smiled. "We are many. And we are already inside your systems, your leaders, your minds. This war has kept your species distracted long enough." "You started the war," Sayela said. "No," the creature replied. "We only gave it a little push. Your kind was always willing to fight. We simply guided your hands." Sovi moved without warning, launching himself at one of the soldiers. In the chaos, Rowan hit the broadcast button. The files began to upload slowly but steadily. The Erics noticed and raised a weapon, but Sayela was faster. She struck with a fluid motion, disarming the creature and knocking it back. The facility shook as a blast hit the outside wall. Reinforcements were coming. Rowan shouted over the noise. "It's sending, almost there." The creature lunged at him, but this time Rowan was ready. He dodged and struck it with a charged pulse from his toolkit. It screamed and collapsed in a heap of sparks and broken disguise. Seconds later, the screen flashed green. Transmission complete. The message had been sent. The room fell quiet, except for the labored breathing of the 3 allies. Outside, the storm had picked up, but the truth was free now, out in the world beyond the reach of any one force. Leaders on both sides would know, citizens would question, the lies would unravel. Sayela turned to Rowan, her face calm but unreadable. "You did it." "No," Rowan said, "we did." Sovi looked at them both. "They'll hunt us now. We've made powerful enemies." Rowan nodded. "Then we keep moving." They left the facility behind, vanishing into the trees before the next wave could arrive. Hours later, under the shelter of a rock ledge, Sayala looked at Rowan. "You could have left me to die, but you didn't. Why?" He met her gaze. "Because I saw someone who needed help, and now I see someone I want to stand beside." She smiled softly, then leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a sign of closeness among her people. The war had brought them together, but the truth had made them stronger. As dawn broke over the mountains, Rowan knew the road ahead would be dangerous. But with Sayala beside him, and the truth finally free, he no longer felt alone. The decision he had made back in the forest, the decision to help a stranger, had changed everything. And now, it was only the beginning.